Dear colleagues, good day. We are beginning the work of our conference on decentralized generation in Ukraine, new opportunities for businesses and communities. Here we have almost 300 of representatives of business, local self-governance authorities, experts, financiers, all of those who the opportunity to create huge number of electrical stations depend on. The electrical stations which would be which would be harder to shell by Russian Federation to do what they used to do before, leaving us without a huge amount of electricity. Today we are expecting for speeches from policymakers, from international partners who are creating the opportunities for generation. We'll have the presentation from the head of Укренерго, Mr. Volodymyr Kudrytsky, who is also working on the creating of capacities and capabilities for decentralized generation in Ukraine. And we are expecting for the discussions. So please, after the speeches, get ready with the questions so that we could find out in more details how it is working and why each of us needs to know about that a bit more. So, a bit more about the rules. We really ask you to write about this event, post the pictures of this event, but only tomorrow in the morning. Today, let us not do that because of the security reasons. And also, the ones who would like to get simultaneous interpretation into English or Ukrainian, you can get the headset. And what's very important, to take these headsets into the shelter if there is an air raid alert. Because if there is an air raid alert, we go down to the shelter. You can see the directions to the shelter, and my colleagues will show you the way how to get down to the shelter. There we'll go on working. We will not just wait there, we'll be working on in the shelter. And now let's move to the speeches. The first is, I give the floor to Mr. Valery Tarasyuk, member of NERC, who has done a lot to create the auctions we'll be speaking about today. And this is the thing which will allow and make it possible to create the new electrical stations. So we are speaking here, and then there will be the Q&A session. Please. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm the representative of our national regulator, and we as a regulator are doing a lot, and I think we'll do everything possible to create the new system of decentralized generation. In particular, as you know, our further steps which have been conducted, that is the increase of price caps, and we are also following this process. Maybe we'll need to increase them more so that the prices would allow the future generation and the current generation to work. The simplifying and the cheapening and also unification and merge. As far as I know, we also took the obligation to follow the process and to follow each new project. So please, come to us. We will be really sensitive about any of the issues if they exist as for the connection. And the creation of the long-term auctions, I think this is the main topic of this event. Укренерго and Volodymyr Kudrytsky will tell more about that. We were trying to be very waitful about this process. We have created it and are implementing it. I really hope that all of the participants have heard it, will hear about it, and new generation will be developed. And again, I would like to emphasize that we are following the process very closely. We are observing all of the processes, and we are close to you. Please come to us. I wish all of you success, to all of us. I wish success in that, on this way. Thank you. Thank you, Valery, for your work as well. Mr. Andriy Garos, MP and the head of the Line Committee, who maybe will be able to tell us how the rules which are being created now will be long-term, because lots of things depend on the term. Good day, do you hear me? We do. Okay, thank you for such an event. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, really. We see during the recent months certain dramatic changes in our energy system, and as for these dramatic changes, we need to provide a quick response, quick solutions. But altogether, I'd like these quick solutions to be appropriate and wise solutions so that they could be efficient in the long term. Undoubtedly, this trend, which everybody is speaking about, decentralized generation or distributed generation, it has become obvious for us even in the end of 2022. And the first little but really distributed generation, which I was personally dealing with and I helped to install it, was in Irpin city when we had the gas pump electrical station, which was launched during the last day of January 2023. And it was only of 1 megawatt, because this is an open public information, it's a little electrical station, but then there have been lots of communications about it, and in fact, with these communications, we wanted to tell the whole country that we have such cases. They are realistic, they are totally comprehensible, they're able to be improved and launched, they're efficient in the economic way, and they can be repetitive, so they can substantially change our energy system. In 2023 already, such projects have been developed in Ukraine actively, and substantially thanks to the help of our donors, in particular USAID, who were working with the cities and municipalities. In the beginning of 2024, after relatively calm winter, in spring 2024, since the 22nd of March, we saw again a series of shelling, and this issue has become relevant again. It has become acute, and we again had such massive public attention to it and mass interest towards different economic entities as for the development of such generation. Even in August 2023, we adopted a certain law about the green transformation of our energy system, where we foresaw such norms as active consumer, where each of the consumers, well, almost each of the consumers, complying with certain technical parameters, can create the generation from his or her side of their meter. They can create such generation, and the excess can be given to the grid. So we can provide himself with electrical energy, and the excess will be given to the grid. So we can see that it is already rather, in fact, or demand of high demand. We can see when the fuel stations and shopping malls and different enterprises are already creating such type of generation. And in my opinion, it is also an important element of our future energy system. Moreover, there are also examples when this year, it seems to me this was the first example among the healthcare institutions, when in Khmelnytsky city hospital, they created solar generation on their roofs, and the excess of electrical energy was sold to the grid. And of course, every project like this is rather small, but when such projects are hundreds and hundreds of thousands, this will be substantially influencing, in my opinion, help our electrical system. So that it could help the electrical system, let us be frank, this very generation has to be balanced by someone. We won't be able to operate it, but at least we can balance it. And obviously, it should be done by Укренерго, the operators of Укренерго. It should be done according to certain rules and regulations, so that this type of generation, distributed generation, to be developed. Ukraine is introducing the auctions, the competitions for the new capacities of these auctions, which will take place in the end of this week, or maybe in the beginning of the next week. I hope that everybody knows about them, and I hope that the majority of the presentees are getting ready to take part in these auctions, because the rules which are written down already are written down with a high quality, very wisely, and in the way so that they will be able to exist in the long-term perspective, and they won't lead to any issues or any inefficiency of our energy system, because the main principle which is used there is the competition principle or the competitive principle. No one is appointing any tariffs. All of the tariffs and prices can be gained at the competitive auction, which will be conducted by Укренерго, and the rules are created in such a way to get rid of barriers and obstacles and to allow as many participants to take part in that as possible. But there are certain mechanisms which only allow the participants who have good intentions and a serious attitude towards such auction. So I think that we can expect rather substantial competition. And I think that in some of these auctions, the price can go down and maybe even for about 40 to 50%, thanks to many potential participants who can come and compete at these auctions. And undoubtedly, we need a huge generation. I would say the following. We need more generation, not just small ones, but bigger generation, which will allow us to generate electrical energy in bigger volumes. For that, in Ukraine, we have loan programs. Everybody knows about 579. Everybody knows about the opportunities of loaning for bigger sums of money with interest rates of with the use of hryvnia, which are not that high as of today. And also, we will think on and will communicate about with the EBRD and the energy company whether they can invent any other mechanisms to acquire electrical energy, so that those who would like to construct a different type, bigger generation, could be able to award long-term contracts now to sell their electrical energy, so that those contracts would be bankable. They could go to banks and get funding. So thank you for this event today. If there are any additional questions, or you have any additional questions about the legislation, whether you need amendments to the legislation, we are always in touch with you. We are ready to communicate. By the way, one of the problematic issues as of today for our market is the issue of indebtment, debts, at the balancing market in particular. And in one of our law drafts, which will be given for the second reading, we added the norm that the money which has been accumulated in Укренерго for the crossing of during the import or export, we have auctions, and Укренерgo is selling this excess. The accumulated money is rather substantial this year. It will, in fact, be given to 50-50 for paying out of the debts, half of them for the balancing market, 50% for the guaranteed consumer for the generators of the energy. So we hope that we'll pay off the debts this year, which will be the positive signal. I do apologize to taking so much time. No, it is interesting, but in your speech you mentioned at least 4 or 5 points, and so many people, of so many presentees have additional questions about that, and so I'm sure they will pose their questions during the panel discussions, in particular about bankability, in particular about the loans. But first, I would give the floor to Remi Duflo, Deputy Head of the Representative Office of the European Union of Ukraine. It's very nice that we're speaking about competition according to the European rules, so we can say that it will be working even when we are the EU members, right? I hope that it will happen soon. And I give the floor to Mr. Remi Duflo, because without the help of the international partners, foreign partners, European partners, we wouldn't be able to launch that. Please. Thank you, Roman. If you allow me, I will be speaking in English.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, first of all, for inviting the EU here, for having us here, and for organizing this event. It is both timely and very critically important, because ensuring Ukraine's energy security for the upcoming winter means securing substantial and quick investments in decentralized power and heat generation. And with only 10 weeks to go before the beginning of the heating season, the time for action is now. So let's see briefly what the EU has been doing so far. First of all, we support Ukraine's efforts to decentralize the energy system in several ways. For instance, we have ensured the logistics to bring in Ukraine thousands of generators, transformers, and other equipment through the Union civil protection mechanism, free of charge, from the EU to Ukraine. And Ukraine, by the way, since last year, has been a member of the Union civil protection mechanism, and this helps a lot. What we do also is to fund the purchase of gas turbines, gas piston engines, renewable energy equipment, jointly, of course, with other donors in the so-called Ukraine Energy Support Fund managed by the Energy Secretariat. What we also do is to help the regions which are under attack constantly to strengthen and distribute their energy systems as close as possible to the place of consumption, with obviously a focus currently on Kharkiv. And finally, we have been providing more than 1,000 mobile power generators to the emergency services to ensure the functioning of critical public infrastructure. But this is only what we have been doing so far. What we also have been doing, and which is less obvious maybe, is to provide much of the macroeconomic and financial stability to Ukraine's public bodies, to the government, via our Ukraine facility, while granting financing the budget deficit, to enable the provision of preferential loans, tax exemptions that can go to investments in decentralized energy generation. Now, conditions for a successful winter season, if I may say. First of all, one must render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. I want to say how we appreciate the critical role of Укренерго, not only in ensuring the stable operation of Ukraine's national electricity grid, but also in encouraging businesses and communities to invest in decentralized generation. We have supported Укренерго in these efforts with cooperation programs. I can say maybe a bit more later when we have questions and answers, and aim at increasing this cooperation under the investment component of the Ukraine facility, which I've already mentioned, and which has a special component, we call it Pillar 2, which is dedicated to investments. The capacity, ultimately, the capacity of Укренерго to balance a multitude of decentralized power producers, and this assumes lots of software and intelligent algorithms and smart programs. This is key to achieve energy security now and in the long term. And therefore, Укренерgo's financial stability and therefore its good governance and its close cooperation with the ENTSO-E network are of vital importance. We also support this with programs, particularly technical assistance to ensure full and seamless integration into ENTSO-E. As regards the national regulator, we have been actively supporting it to attract investments in Ukraine's energy system through distributed generation, because it's clear that investment can come only if they produce positive commercial outcome. So for decentralized energy generation facilities to function efficiently, rather than remain idle until there is a major blackout, it's important that producer prices cover at least the running costs of production. But we also look at the tax system, for instance. Recent measures to stimulate investments, like the exemption from import duties and taxes on critical equipment, are very much welcome in our view, and we sincerely hope that businesses will more than now even use this opportunity on a wide scale to invest in their own energy security in light of the coming winter. And finally, we know there are other obstacles that we are ready to help Ukraine to tackle. For instance, because lack of funds, lack of expertise sometimes at the local level, some legal and regulatory obstacles. So today's conference actually is the good forum to address these issues. Now, we want, of course, to work today, but in view of the future. And the principle is that today's investment in winter preparation and local energy security should be important stepping stones for tomorrow's resilience. smart and competitive energy system in Ukraine. We know, of course, there are legal and regulatory obstacles. We already mentioned them briefly, like, for instance, regional monopolies on infrastructure, or lack of access to potential customers, or tariff barriers. On the EU side, we are ready to continue working with all our partners. I mentioned Укренерго and national regulators, but there are more, to remove these obstacles and to facilitate all the necessary investments. There is actually a high interest in such investments by the European financial institutions, and we will use the whole power of the Ukraine facility, which I remind amounts to 50 billion, including 7 billion of guarantees for investment supporting programs, to turn this interest into future-proof investments into Ukraine's decentralized energy system. Thank you.
Дякую.
Thank you. I think that what you spoke about today, Ukraine facility, is a tool that will allow us to get investment. Volodymyr will speak more about this in his presentation, since the market already allows supporting and receiving beneficial projects. But today in the room we have an enormous number of business representatives, which means that actually we have been heard, and now we can speak how this can be transformed into projects that may happen not necessarily this winter, but in a short while. You also mentioned the Energy Secretariat. We have Mr. Dirk Bushlet with us online today. Sir, over to you.
Conference on very short notice. I didn't hesitate a minute to interrupt my holiday, because I think the topic that you're dealing with is so important that it deserves really everyone's support. You can count on the energy community in this respect. We all know that what Ukraine needs most today is additional generation. Adding generation capacity and decentralized generation plays an extremely important role in that respect. Decentralized generation is, it has been said by you, Roman, is easier or is less easy to hit. It is easier to decarbonize. It also adds and improves the flexibility of the system. And it will also, let's face it, change the way how the Ukrainian energy system is designed, not only from a technical point of view, but also from a point of view of the ownership, of the monopolies, of the concentration of the system. So for all these aspects, to putting a focus and to invest in decentralized generation is a very important element of changing Ukraine. And it is important to do that now. To decentralize a completely centralized energy system like Ukraine's is not part of some ideal future design. It is what has to happen right now, and it is happening right now. We are working with all the national and international partners that have taken the floor until now to make that happen and to promote and to foster this even during these very difficult times of war. Let me just mention 2 or 3 elements. One is what Andrei Geos represents. That is the changing of the Ukrainian legislation. And I'm talking here profound changes. Besides the Green Transformation Law, that was a huge success of Ukraine and, of course, of the Verkhovna Rada, right now the electricity market law is under complete and profound review. That has to do with the fact that Ukraine will be coupled into the European Union market, but it is also a great chance to repeat something that has happened in 2019, when a paradigm shift has taken place from a foreclosed market, from a single buyer model to an open market based on short-term exchanges, etc. Now is the time to do that again, and I'm very happy that this is in the good hand of the Verkhovna Rada, its Energy Committee, and Mr. Geros. And I would also add and underline the importance of all the stakeholders which are in the room today to bring their expectations, to bring their change requests to this very important text. It will be discussed, it will be open for public consultation, and I think this is an opportunity not to be missed. The second is the regulatory improvements that have taken place. And this is Valery Tarasyuk, I think, who has to be thanked personally a lot for what he and NERC have been achieving. And this is the price cap, but it is also something that you will be discussing in more detail today, the approach of auctioning. Auctioning not only renewables generation, support to renewables generation, but also ancillary services. This is not necessarily the orthodox European way to do it, but I think under the circumstances that Ukraine is in, it is and was the right approach to be chosen, and we look forward to the implementation of this approach adopted by NERC very soon as well. And lastly, I would also mention investments as such. We all know that attracting private investments, including through auctions, for long-term contracts and other schemes is important and is inevitable. And of course, we are hoping on a very active participation in these auctions. But at times of war, at times of where Ukraine is in need, the public sector has to lead. And the public sector is the sector where the solidarity of many Western governments and undertakings is being united, is being translated into public money that is administered inter alia by the Ukraine Energy Support Fund, which we are managing at the Energy Community, a fund, as you may be aware of, that has attracted over 500 million euros by now, and where we're putting a lot of emphasis on winterization, on adding generation capacity now still before winter, generation that can make a difference for winter, but also generation that is flexible, that is distributed, that is decentralized. We are rolling out, as we speak, a project for putting rooftop solar panels on 20 plus hospitals in the country, and there's more to come. We're ready to do that also for other critical infrastructure, from public administration to customers and to infrastructure like the water supply, etc. There is money, there is the will of international donors to support such type of projects, and we are doing it as we speak. We also, when trying to find on the international markets those equipments that can still be delivered and installed in Ukraine before winter, we are looking in particular at gas turbines. We are now providing an additional, a significant additional volume of new capacity, for instance, for the operator of the gas pipelines in Ukraine, GTSOU, to make sure that with flexible generation, there is an additional contribution to the winter, but also there is an additional contribution to supporting renewables distributed generation. So all this goes hand in hand, and it has to be tackled, and the conference today is an important milestone in this respect. It has to be tackled from the investment side, from the regulatory side, from the legislative side. And the good news is, and I think your echo today in the room testifies to that, that the international community, alongside all the Ukrainian stakeholders, authorities, and companies, are indeed ready to change the way how Ukraine's system has been functioning until now, under the pressure of war, under a huge stress in front of the upcoming winter, but ultimately successfully. Thanks a lot.
Дякую.
Thank you. And Mr. Bushley, we heard an absolutely logical mention of investments, because indeed humanitarian aid would not be enough. So we would like to understand how international investment can be involved. So, Mr. Robertson, what do you think about international investment and how it can be organized?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's great to be here today. I'm recently moved to Kyiv as the World Bank Country Director, and I'm really pleased to be living here, and especially on a topic that is so important today on this decentralized generation. As we all know, as winter approaches, this is a critical issue, and I really want to commend Укренерго and our other partners here and all of you in the room for what you are doing. It's a real privilege for us at the World Bank Group, including the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, and our other international partners to be able to work with you on these critical issues. What I thought today in my brief introductory remarks is to focus on both some short-term measures and some more in the medium to longer term. In the short term, we know, as we're hearing, that the small generation, decentralized generation units are going to both add capacity to the energy system while being less exposed to the risk of being attacked. And therefore, it's going to increase the resiliency of the system. With this in mind, 3 points from my perspective. Firstly, what we are doing with other international partners under the Repower project is financing the provision of small cogeneration units to Kharkiv City to help produce electricity and heat during the coming winter. Once the heating season is over, these can also help with the electricity supply for these communities. We've also learned from the Ministry of Restoration that there are other cities that could benefit from this equipment to help get ready for winter. It is, however, very important that these municipalities have sufficient resources to install and operate such capacity. The second element here in the more immediate term is that the IFC is also in discussions to finance the distributed gas generation that's operated by several state-owned enterprises. This could be a real opportunity now as well. And then finally, one that I know has a number of challenges but requires some consideration is, are there other solutions that are in play, such as leasing models for distributed generation? We understand that these may require war insurance, grants, and other very complex solutions. Our teams are ready to discuss and explore, along with you and other development partners, if these are going to be feasible solutions. As we look more to the medium and longer term, we've been supporting, as with others, the government of Ukraine on these very important sector reforms and on the energy transition, because that's what's going to really help the integration with the European electricity markets. And this has been done through where we have what we call our development policy operations, where we support reforms, and in close collaboration with the Energy Community Secretariat and with the European Commission. Several of these reforms are, in the medium term, focused on to increase green investments, including decentralized renewables and storage. 3 points in this regard. In fact, increasing the share of renewables as we go forward in the future will require flexible generation and storage to ensure the proper operation of these systems. So we're also supporting Укренерго and Укрhydroenergo to install battery storage to increase and optimize their ability to provide these resources that will help with regulating and balancing the system. But most importantly, we also recognize that the private sector is critical to enter these solutions, and especially in securing the energy security that Ukraine desires. So local and international private investments will need to ramp up the renewables at the required pace. The IFC, our private sector arm, will process within the coming months the financing for 350 megawatts of new onshore wind projects in Western Ukraine with private sector companies backed with partial EU guarantees. In addition, a risk-sharing facility is currently under preparation to support mid-cap corporate loans on this. And then finally, looking forward, the World Bank Group is considering setting up financial mechanisms to scale up renewables and battery storage through attracting private sector. But again, these we would know would be implementable after the victory. So finally, I would like to reiterate our commitment to continue our support of Ukraine's recovery to help increase resilience in the energy sector, both to the attacks and to mitigate the impacts on the Ukrainian population and the economy to the extent possible. I look forward to our discussion and continued collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. We started the conversation about decentralized generation even a year ago, and now from these presentations we understood that we understand all factors that we need for this energy to emerge: market opportunities, technologies, private investment. So I think now we need to move on to the question not what to build, but how to build it. Укренерго is now making its first steps, particularly through auctions that are now functioning, and I hope we will hear more about them from Mr. Kudrycki, a representative of Укренерго. Hello, everyone. Today we have quite a few people here. I guess we have the most progressive part of the energy community here with us. Naturally, we communicate today in quite a difficult period for Ukrainian energy. We have a big problem, and this problem is very specific. After several months of intense shelling, we don't have sufficient generation, we don't have sufficient production of energy in the grid, and the consequences of this lack, unfortunately, have already been very tangible in June and July this year. This was a very vivid example for us. And of course, to fix this problem strategically, it will not be enough to just restore what is being destroyed, because it is impossible to restore everything quickly. We need to build new generation. And it so happened that one of the functions of Укренерго, which is possibly not very well known, everyone knows that we mostly introduce some power cut schedules, but we do a lot more. We manage the energy systems. We try to ensure the connection of our grid with the European one, and we are also the organization that models the energy system the way it should function, based on certain economic criteria. And actually, as for how we can stimulate with our colleagues from other institutions, how we can ensure the construction of this new energy, that's what I want to talk about today in my presentation. Apologies. So, why do we need a decentralized energy system? Because today, the Ukraine generation is largely provided by quite a small number of traditional large thermal, hydro, and nuclear power plants. Of course, when there is a small number of such plants or stations, a large number of generation capacity is concentrated in one location. And power plants were becoming targets for the enemy since 2022. Because hitting a plant with 2 or 3 missiles, you can immediately destroy quite large capacity. So the only way to build a sustainable, more resilient, more stable energy system is to replace one station with 1,000 megawatts with 200 stations of 5 megawatts each. So decentralization of generation itself is necessary. And actually, we are speaking about the balancing segment. And it is generation that provided maneuver for the energy system of Ukraine for many years. That is the ability to produce exactly the amount of power that the consumer needs at every point in time. That is why decentralized generation is the only possible long-term response to Russian attacks. Because no one can have enough missiles, that would be tens of thousands of missiles, to destroy hundreds of thousands of power plants. How can it work for a specific city or specific town or another administrative unit? While in the traditional energy system, large capacity is produced at large thermal or hydro power plants and then delivered to the locations through the grid of Укренерgo. We have distribution into oblasts and then to consumers. Now we speak about having a decentralized energy system where delivery can take place to a smaller unit of the grid, but what is important is that local generation is located closer to the consumer.
And it will play more significant role in the energy system. If you want, I would say that partially it will replace the role which has always been played by the traditional generation in the energy system. So when you look at the system of energy transmission and transportation, we showed only approximate figures here, just so that we could understand what amount we are speaking about. If we have such not a big number of really big electrical stations which are providing our power, our electrical consumption. Even if we speak about the streamline grids of Укренерго, such substations before the invasion were more than 100. I mean, of the main level. But speaking about Obelenерgo grid, they are approximately 30,000. So obviously, it's understandable why now the Russians are mostly concentrating their shelling, missile shelling, on the generation objects, because they are fewer. And in this way, they are increasing the intensity of these strikes. So again, our response is that as the ways to deliver the electrical energy are mostly decentralized already, and as at the substations of Укренерго for a very long time, we have already the works on their fortification, and we have already created an unprecedented reserve of equipment, and we can be sure in our capacity to supply electrical energy between the regions and to provide the connectivity of electrical system, to provide the energy system from collapse, from the full blackout. We need to combine and connect a huge number of different substations to different class of, in fact, capacities, so as every Ukrainian city could have certain local generation. Why is it useful? I really love this picture, in fact. And today in the morning, I've already looked through it for several times. I love it. It's the only animated slide in my presentation, don't worry. So there are several obvious advantages of the energy system with decentralized generation. First of all, it is sustainable in facing Russian attacks, and it could be already the main results, but it has several more advantages. First of all, decentralizing generation, we are also decentralizing, if I may say so, the owners of this generation. We're not only creating a huge number of electrical stations, we are also creating a huge number of players at the market. And we all are saying for a long time about competition, that we would like to see the high competitive and transparent market of electrical energy. Please, here it is. The market gives a powerful player which covers the basic capacity like Energoatom, and semi-peak and peak schedule will be covered by a bigger number of companies, not just 3 or 4 of them, not 5 of them, but I would say several dozens of them. So if we cope with that, maybe even several hundreds. And under such conditions, it's really complicated if you would like to manipulate the volume and the price. They are more efficient as technologies. Obviously, the substantial part of our energy capacity is needed modernization, even long before the invasion and even long before the war. We had lots of conversations that Ukrainian energy systems needs technological re-equipment. When I came to the energy sector in 2016, these conversations were already going on for a long time. But what we never had is some substantial steps to do that. Certain modernization took place, but mostly it took place within our preparation to the integration with the European system. We've replaced certain systems of regulation of frequency and capacity to connect. But the main part, the majority of these capacities are still at the same technological level as they used to be, except the renewables, which were developing rather actively. Stability of delivery for the communities, diversification of energy mix, and decarbonization of energy sector. I would really like to speak openly. It is not the main reason why we are today speaking about decentralized generation. The main reason is the war. And that the decentralized generation is the only way for the energy system in the long-term perspective just to survive. But the energy mix, which we will be discussing after this process is over, mostly will be about 95–98% a neutral one as for the CO2 emissions. And of course, the creation of local job places. A huge number of smaller stations in the communities will lead to the creation of job places in these communities, not only at these stations, but also at the enterprises which will be working with them. So, moving to why we gathered all of you here today. When last year, within the London Conference on Recovery, we've announced the ambitious goals about the involvement and attraction of approximately 400 billion euro of investments into the energy sector, the construction of lots of hundreds of gigawatt of new capacities. We were observing what is taking place after that, and we saw that these plans were not implemented that quickly. So we began to think, why is that? And we came to two conclusions as a result of very deep analysis. The first conclusion which we made is that maybe at the market we should have a price for the electrical energy, which would also provide enough of earnings for the stations, at least to cover their operational costs. Then, together with the National Energy Regulator, the NERC, and it was done more by NERC than by NEC, we reconsidered the price caps. And today, the price is 5–6,000 hryvnia for megawatt hour, allows any generation, according to any technology, gas, coal, solar, wind, hydro generation, nuclear generation. It allows, such price cap allows to get profit. And the second part, which conclusion we also achieved, that we need some tool which would provide the investor with a long-term guarantee of return on investments. So then we began to think on some new addition of green tariff, and we instantly got rid of this idea, because we all know that the story with green tariff, as one of the previous heads of energy community said, it's too good to be true. It's too good, in fact, to be true. So this system has generated a huge amount of debts. We wouldn't like to give new promises, especially for the long-term perspective, which later wouldn't be complied with. So, together with the Commission, we invented an interesting solution, as I think. We took our existing tariff for the operation activity, and out of that we finance ancillary services. These are the services provided by the station to the system. In fact, this is the readiness of the station, to support under the command of the operator. And we have the lack of these services because the energy system doesn't have that many balancing stations which could provide such services. Hydro and heat power plants are really damaged. So we decided that we need long-term contracts for the ancillary services, 5-year contracts. And this was a kind of innovation, not only for us and regulator, but also for our colleagues from energy community. And Dirk Bushler, who had a speech here, was one of the persons who supported us from European side, on the implementation of such auctions. They don't exist in the majority of European countries. If you want, it's our know-how. So, what do we offer? We offer a contract with the winners on the auctions for 5 years, starting approximately with the end of September 2025. It's fixed in euro, so that you, the ones who are representing here, I would say investors, the investors community, that you can construct during a year the stations which would provide the balancing of energy system, like gas piston, gas turbine, the systems for the energy and biomass, so-called new heat generation. And during these 5 years, we will pay you for what we have in the grid. The sum which we pay, the sum of money which we pay, is times and times different from the amounts of money which is paid in the EU countries in average, because in Ukraine we have a huge deficit of such stations. And satisfying this deficit or covering it would be the task of ours together with you. We'll have 2 auctions. The first one is on the 15th of August, the need of 100, or I would say 99 megawatt. This is a kind of primary regulation, and mostly the systems of energy which are very rapid and maneuverable can take part in this auction. The second auction is a kind of more of a massive character. So we'll buy 1,000 of megawatt. 579 is for the upload. That is the ability for the new stations which will be created in a year to support the energy system, increasing their generation. And 421 megawatt is the symmetrical reserve, the stations which will be able to provide both processes according to the operator's command. The strategy of the sales and behavior at the market for these 3 types of stations will be different. And we will be speaking about that in more details during our thematic panels. But in fact, in 2 weeks, maybe a bit more than 2 weeks, we would like to create our first gigawatt of distributed generation. And we are doing that. What's the beauty of this solution? As for me, this solution does not depend on someone or collective decision. It does not depend on a specific person of Mr. Kudrytsky, Mr. Tarasyuk, Mr. Harus, or any other officials, because this is the contract which is awarded for 5 years. Because today's price at the electrical energy market is not shaped because of the wish of some person. And the price for the ancillary services is guaranteed and should provide the payoff of your investments during the 5-year period. So, we would like to create a system which will be resilient, not only against Russian missile attacks, but also bureaucratic and administrative peculiarities, I would say, at the market of electrical energy. I think the majority of you know what I mean, right? So, What do we, as the operators, consider to be necessary to be constructed in this energy system to provide its resilient functioning? Two criteria of such system. First one, it should be capable at any moment in time to provide the coverage of consumption according to any scenarios of this consumption. This is the adequacy of the system. We need to construct 4.5 gigawatt of wind, 3.7 gigawatt of solar stations to make this system cheaper. And so system could be compliant with the second criteria, it's economic efficiency. But to integrate these 4.5 gigawatt into the system, we need three technologies which are shown to the left of this graph. This is the high maneuverable gas stations. This is the new heat generation with biofuel, biomass, and also the preservation of electrical energy. Those three technologies, we need 1.4 of gas, up to 1.1 gigawatt of new tests with biofuel, and up to 1 gigawatt, 0.8 gigawatt in the preservation of electrical energy, at least. That is at least. It's not the maximum, it's minimum. So, in fact, what is written on the slide, it can be perceived as the generation which will be needed according to any scenarios or development of events. I mean the macro circumstances. The scenario for the development of the events at the front line, the scenario of demand development at the governmentally controlled area after the occupation of our territories, all of this will be needed. Even today, before our meeting, I was already asked by many people, okay, we will deoccupy Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, then we will not need such generation. Dear friends, let me open a little secret. We have started to model the energy system according to the so-called European rules and regulations in 2017. We provide the first model. And do you know what? The figures here are not that different from the ones which we showed then. We then said before the invasion that we will need, up to 2032, we'll need to take the majority of capacities of heat capacities and replace them with this cocktail of technologies. What has changed now? Because of the Russian shellings, a huge amount of balancing capacities, unfortunately, are not accessible anymore. That is why we need to speed up. And this leap into the future shouldn't be done in 8 years, but only in 2 or 3. That is why we need approximately 13 billion euro. But it's not the state budget money. These are the private investments, because it's impossible in a centralized way to create a decentralized generation. That is why I'm so happy that we are so numerous here, 350 of us. If there were 1,350 here, I would be even happier. But I'm sure that the investors who would like to invest with a payback period of 3 or 4 years, I hope there will be a sufficient number of them. Now I would like to tell you about our modeling of economy of the work of each of these stations. We are not professional investors into the generation. That is why we made certain assumptions when we calculated the indicators. It was done by one very talented person, the head of our strategy department, and he has a birthday today. So if you have any questions for the figures, we'll give him his contacts. You will be able to call him after the event, as it's his birthday. So the high maneuvering generation is gas peakers. They are working in the morning and in the evening when the energy system needs additional capacity, when the consumption is the highest. Their profits is for the plants of 5 megawatt is approximately 1 million euro per year. That is our service. That's what we'll sell in the auctions in 2 or 3 weeks. And also the sales of electrical energy at the market, when the operator gives the command for such station to generate the electricity, it generates it out of the gas and sells at the market. As for the costs, they are modeled considering the today's gas price. Let me tell you about gas. Today, the prime cost of working on gas, after I communicated with many people who are working with gas piston systems of container type, which was described above, that's about 3.5 of 4,000 hryvnia per hour. This is the prime cost of work of such installation. During the peak hour, the price of electrical energy can achieve 7 or 8,000, at the balancing market even 10,000 hryvnia. This is the highly profitable business. Electrical stations which are using, or power stations using biofuel. There are several options here. You can sell this ancillary service for us as the operator, but look at the production. It really reminds you the coal station. It is per 24 hours. So maybe for this station, the best idea would be to deliver this unit to produce not only electricity but also heat, and to sell heat together with electricity, especially during the fall and winter period when the offtake is substantial. It could be a nice idea. Such units need the highest capex per megawatt than gas, to 2.5 euro per megawatt. But they also gave higher income, and they are working for a longer period of time. The systems of the energy storage, the basic model, which we consider, is the work at the market of ancillary services.
We are basing this on the fact that 30 to 50% of time, at least, the battery will be able to provide the service to the energy system. Of course, it will need to charge, recharge after it provides the service. But one of the main components ensuring the guaranteed profit from this unit is the ancillary services that we will be buying at the auction for 5 years, let me remind you. But for these units, there is also an arbitration opportunity. They will most probably be loading during the low consumption time, at nighttime, for instance, or in the summer, and they will produce the capacity in the morning and in the evening when the prices and the consumption are high. So they also need to make money off arbitration, of the difference in pricing. The difference between nighttime and evening, for instance, or between daytime and evening time. And are already traditional generation for Ukraine, solar power and wind power. There will be very little that I can say that will be new for you. I will only say that most wind stations have left the balancing group of the guaranteed buyer. Let me translate what it means. These stations are reducing the green tariff now because the pricing on the market today is already, the market price is better than the green tariff these days. This is the moment when correct regulatory action led to a situation when some artificial support mechanisms have become unnecessary in economic terms. So we really hope that solar and wind projects alongside projects of balancing stations and balancing units that we talked about today will be developing in the Ukrainian energy system. We need these projects to, so to speak, fill the gap in the energy system instead of the decommissioned power stations. And when a wind power plant cannot work due to weather reasons, it will be supported by a battery or gas generation or some other working generation. And that's the point, isn't it? And finally, the last slide and the last thing that I wanted to mention. Many of you and many of the people who are not present here today, generation companies that producing companies that encountered power outages that harm the production. Is it a good idea to create their own generation, to set up their own power station? Yes, it is. Energy from the grid costs 8 to 10 hryvnias with VAT. It is landed cost with all taxes and transportation involved. At this level, we calculated, and believe me, for the past 2 days, I was trying to get more conservative numbers from my colleagues so that you could really believe those numbers. We went over and over these numbers, and I can honestly say that the profit that will be provided by a 10 megawatt power station, if you have a large plant and you need that capacity, the difference between the landed cost, for instance, on gas, and the price of the purchase of energy from the grid gives an enormous difference, a big economic effect on you. And what is more, you will not be dependent on power outages. But you also have 2 options. The first option is that you can sell ancillary services for us from that additional station when you don't use the system. For instance, you know that you have a 12-hour working day, so the 12 hours when the plant doesn't works with reduced consumption, you can sell the excessive capacity of the station to us as the energy system operator. The second option is you can deliver heat and sell heat from this energy station, thus improving its economic viability. That is, dear friends, I really hope that in 2.5 weeks we will be able to start a new page, to turn a new leaf in the history of the Ukrainian energy. I know that many of you have heard in the past weeks and months that development of new generation is something that is very long term, that it is very unlikely, and this may never happen. We heard these same conversations in 2021 about combining the Ukrainian grid with the European grid. Back in October, November 2021, many people were saying that it will be impossible, that the Ukrainian energy system isn't capable of that technically. Well, now it's time to prove again, to prove the skeptics wrong, and to show that we are capable of doing a lot of work to ensure that our energy system would be sustainable, and its operation is not only up to our international partners, with all due respect, not only to the regulator, it's not up to the energy system itself. This work is up to all of us. That's why thank you very much for your attention. I am looking forward to your provocative, serious questions, to all the speakers, me included. And I am looking forward to our next 2 panels where we will talk about what I spoke about today in more detail. Vladimir, thank you very much. May I ask the first acute question? When you showed the slide with the solar and wind stations, when you spoke about a 3-year payoff, I saw that a lot of people took pictures of that slide. We have a 3-year payoff, and Volodymyr Kudrytsky is against that backdrop. Are you ready to have this picture shown to you in 3 years and to be asked where is our payoff? Yes, if there is an opportunity in 3 years, I am absolutely ready to answer this question. Before we move on to questions from the room, I already see some hands in the room. I have a question to Mr. Andriy. Are you ready to guarantee that there will not be a major change in terms of the energy market in the Ukrainian politics? Look, there may be different changes for the better and for the worse. So I hope that there will be changes for the better. So I cannot guarantee that there will be no change, because we are going to work to make sure there is good change happening. Pavlo Kozyrev, Association of Small Cities of Ukraine, over to you, please. Let's hand him the mic. Can we get another mic? This is a microphone of Suspilli. They are independent. Don't touch it. Pavlo Kozyrev, head of the Association of Small Cities of Ukraine. I don't have a very acute question, I think, but I am very concerned about it. If we look at the effort put in by the government in terms of investment, in terms of fixing the situation, and if we look at the investment by our international partners, and also if we look at the last mile, what is happening in communities now, we will see a major difference. So my question to speakers, probably Andriy, you first of all, but I'm also curious about what our international partners think. I understand that these are inertia-based processes, but I think we do have a bottleneck somewhere that prevents us from working equally along this entire cycle. If you think that we do have this bottleneck, this obstacle somewhere, what is it? And the second question, shouldn't we study this entire cycle from decision-making about investment to changes in the legal architecture and to these actual people who hope for the better, and municipalities feel pressured by their populations because they want to have power in an uninterrupted way. Shouldn't we study this entire decision-making cycle and see where gaps may exist? Because I feel that if we do everything correctly, we will be the most energetic country in the world, consisting of the most energetic communities. Let's have a minute for a response, 2 minutes at most for a minute for the question, 2 minutes at most for a response. Look, let me start from the end. If we do everything correctly, we will be the most energetic, like you put it, country in the world, but not next month, not this year. But with a lot of effort, with a lot of complications, maybe by the end of next year, and I hope that next winter it will be unproblematic. The winter of next year, I mean. So there is no magic bullet that will tell you we stop export into Europe and things will suddenly get better. There is no export into Europe. To change the situation, we need to do a lot of things. There are indeed problems with connections somewhere, but today the problems with connections are not the main ones for the generation today. Municipalities sometimes do have problems with funding, with finances. There are unfortunately a lot of cases when communities get gas units for free, but they need to connect them to the grid at their own funds, at least partially. Not everyone has sufficient funds to organize this connecting project, to co-finance it even. I don't know if you've seen these stories, but there was this fake that Zhytomyr does a good job. They don't have power cuts because they are doing a good job. No, that's a fake. Same with Khmelnytsky. When we work sufficiently and when we take all the right steps, we will identify the bottlenecks and the situation will become easier and better overall. But this work takes time, and this path is not week-long or month-long, but every path starts with the first step, and we need to start taking this path, move forward as quickly as we can, and our plans are to ensure that next year our energy system will be more stable and we can avoid major problems like we had in May, and June, July. And we can all do this together, including everyone who is present here and everyone who is ready and planning to invest in units in our energy system. Question, please. Over to you. Hello, my question is we work with gas units, and I have a question that probably no one will be able to answer, but maybe you will have some kind of response. So the question is, if the issue with payments from the balancing market is not resolved, the gas units will not be able to work, because if there is no gas purchase, there will be no payments for energy, then you stop, you will get 30,000 euros for a megawatt. That's the guarantee payment from the bank, and this will basically be all ruined. What can you respond to banks? That is Sense, Oshad, and Укрексимбанк. Every one of them asks these questions. Can I refer to you? Can I say that Mr. Geras said this? I don't know what to tell them. I really don't know. It's been a while since I had no response to a question. Thank you. Roman, I have 2 minutes to respond. I see that Volodymyr also wants to say something. Yeah, I do. I guess that's the most important question today. I already said earlier this year that we are planning to pay off the debt on the energy market completely. I think you heard it already, and I will say it again. We do have this plan. What is more, we have already started doing this. If I'm not wrong, we already paid off 5 billion hryvnias in debt on this market. The government resolution and the law, the draft law, allowing to prevent further accumulation of debt are already at quite a mature stage. The most complicated part of this problem, that's about 25 years old, is stop accumulating debt. And the source of debt is that some consumers in Ukraine, mostly state-owned and municipal enterprises, don't fully pay for the power they receive. And that's a systemic problem. Today, we have several ways how to resolve this problem with balancing. The first one is the dispatch tariff that was assisted by the regulating actions, and we were able to pay off part of the debt from this service using the available resources. And the second part is what Andriy said, is that we will be able to use our revenue from the international movement and use these funds for paying off the debt. Most importantly, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Укренерго engaged enormous amount of financing, loans and grants for the Ukrainian energy sector, not only for our own needs, but also to pay off debts on the market. Let me assure you that without this ability to engage funds, the debts on the market, the green energy market, the ancillary services market, would be 40 to 50% bigger than they are today. So what we are planning to do this year, and what I unfortunately cannot share in detail now, is that we are planning to organize a transaction, one-time transaction with international financial organizations to ensure that all these debts are completely paid off. The situation is that this money is removed from the balancing market and never returned. The problem is the long-term payment. Right, Mr. Larionov. The period of payment was 14 months in the first quarter. Now it is, let's say, 11 months. And to reach 1 month or 0 months, as is required by the rules, is why we are going to organize this transaction this year. And I'm going to talk more about it later. I cannot speak about it yet. Two moments. In 2022 and 2023, this provision was adopted as well, and this year we also want to do this one-time thing when the crossing funds are used to set off the payment. This is not very easy to resolve in a sustainable way. Now we have a draft law, which is the second item I want to talk about. I don't remember the number of this draft law, but the point is that there is a provision that is proposed which says that if somebody doesn't pay for the power and debts occur in the balancing market because the supplier doesn't get money from the enterprise. There are a lot of such enterprises, and this reaches millions and billions of hryvnias. So if somebody doesn't pay for power, they can first use the last resort supplier first, and then they will be disconnected from the grid regardless of what kind of enterprise it is, or they can keep using the last resort supplier, but they have to open a special account where all the revenue from the entrepreneurial activity goes, and a part of this money automatically goes to pay off the debt. We believe that at least half the enterprises will be immediately removed from the balancing market, because sometimes I think it is used as a scheme not to pay for the power. So everyone will really worry whether they need to use this idea. And another part that is, well, with the enterprise that have a difficult situation, they will be using the special account, but they will be mandatorily paying a certain part of funds for the power. There will be no enterprise that don't pay for their power. This shouldn't happen.
So, the basic scenario, please, you can pay for power and you wouldn't need to open any special accounts. But if you don't pay for the power, please, then with the special accounts, this money will be taken from these accounts for the consumed energy, and it will stop the appearing of new debts at the balancing account. And if, as Volodymyr said, the existing debts are paid and the new debts are not appearing, or maybe are appearing but not that substantially, this problem at least will not be eliminated but minimized. Thank you, but a short remark. As for the connections, in the presentation of Volodymyr, 1 megawatt, 10 million euro. But as for the connection, that's important for the banks to understand. That is 20 to 40% of the price of installation. So 1 megawatt is already connected, will cost up to 1.5. I would like to involve more people today, and then we'll speak in more details during the following panels. You, then Alexander, then Svetoslav Pavlyuk. We would like to hear both associations and the experts, please. Hello, Yuri Podolyak, company of KNET. We are the representatives, the technical representatives of the investors. So a couple of questions to each of you. Mr. Tarasuk, the question to you. Many enterprises are acquiring solar stations and gas piston systems, but they don't know how to connect them. The active consumer or the producer, are we the one or the other? Can we connect to the grid? By the code we cannot, by the regulation we can. So the regulation is different. I love the nice initiative of Укренерго. So the first question goes to you. Do you consider how to be public, to create the Q&A session, an open one, and in fact to explain everything to the people. That is very important. The second question to Mr. Geros. Now, do you consider an option when the stations are working with a green tariff, so we can create something like a green tariff or the auction, but with two conditions. First, gas, not natural gas, like additional or biogas or mine gas. There can be different types of gas so that it could be an independent source. And the second one is the kind of maneuverability and to create that for all of the systems. I know that there are some investors which are using ancillary or additional gas, and I know some of the initiatives with the mine gas. And a short question, no, let us have only two questions, okay? Because we'd like to hear more people, Mr. Tarasyuk and Mr. Harris. Okay. We'll think on the idea to create more information campaigns, but again, I'd like to emphasize we are open. Just take my phone number and call me. I will help each of you, and you in particular. But the question that everybody should hear you, because people can have different vision how to connect, and we need to make it for everybody. But the questions are yours, so come to us, and of course we'll work with you. Look, it's hard to give a very specific answer to the very common question. The behavior can be different. We shouldn't be afraid. Very often we can see that there is some kind of fear to complain. And you can complain either anonymously or officially, but we need to consider every specific case of behavior. Then it will be easier to help you. Now about the active consumer and gas power stations and gas piston stations. I'd like to speak about that as well. We have Andriy, my colleague, who used to be one of the authors and active contributors of this law draft, and Ilya Podulyar, who is now working in USAID. So when we were working on it, there was such a provision. How can we work with the active consumers? Will it be only for green generation or for everybody? I insisted on everybody. If you install the gas one, you could be the active consumer as well. Ilya was not happy about that, and we understood that we are writing down that gas generation can be used by active consumer as well. But then our law was read by NERC, the regulator, and they gave the explanations. Mr. Formagay gave the explanation who has gas generation cannot be active consumer. When we wrote the law, we thought that they can. Why they interpreted the law in this way, I don't know. Maybe it was not too specific, but we will correct it. When we adopted this law today, gas generation can be done by active consumers. So you can be courageous and the excess can be given to the grid. And the second question, about the types of green tariffs for the stations. I don't know why you need green tariff for the incentivization for gas generators. The gas of the power, especially during evening peaks, is 9 hryvnia. It stimulates to sell to the market. And you don't need the green tariff, and the country does not need it to have any debts. You will have 100% of payments, and you will be able to sell the whole schedule. And in the evening, you will be able to use high prices. I don't see any need of that. I don't think that it will substantially change anything at the market. As of today, the market can be attractive without that. Alexander Dombrovsky, Bioenergy Association, please. A short comment and 2 short questions. Knowing Ukrainian businesses during the last 10 years, I'm very optimistic, Volodymyr, about the perspective, because Ukrainian business has huge experience, technological experience, implementing all of the projects and spheres which you listed above. But I've got 2 questions. First, you said that after the auctions, the start will be since September 2025, right? But we have the companies which are ready to launch battery storage even to this year. The same concerns cogeneration. Maybe we should think about the stimulation system, because the quicker the better. And the second question, maybe I should go on with about the connection discussion, Укренерго, gas formalization, but we have one more issue, a critical issue between the businesses and local self-governance authorities. When we are speaking about cogeneration, the use of heat, we need really specific formalized rules of the connection to the grids to consume heat by the local heat grids. And not only connection, but also the rules of tariffs pricing, because every city has its own rules, and it can be a very serious issue as far as I know as for the launch of this market. Thank you. Well, let me start then with the perspective of the heat, because I totally agree with you, because in fact, in our model, financial model, what I showed to you before, we were trying to create it according to the electrical part, to provide at least the minimal payback of investments. But of course, without heat, it is lower. So additional investments into the heat production, under the condition that there is the system where this heat can be given to, is improving the economic parameters of any project. As for the power stations, either gas stations or storage systems, which will be ready even before September 2025, let me explain how we can see it, the rules of the game. We are saying that not later than September 2025, when we are expecting to have the winners of our 2 auctions in the grid. So, since the end of September 2025, we already have fines for the misfunctioning of their services. But the system of energy storage, which is created before that, it does not mean that it cannot be used in the energy system. The thing is that even now, I don't see the main operator of Укренерго. He is hidden from the light and from the gazes of the people. But he will not let me lie. We are not acquiring additional reserves because the system does not have enough of balance in generation. In other words, let me translate that into human language. Tomorrow, battery storage systems, we don't have only 5-year auctions. We also conduct other types of auctions for the shorter periods of time. So we are doing that on a permanent basis. And this system of energy storage or gas station can appear tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, for the monthly auction. For the whole period of time till September 2025, we can get this service, and the competition, unfortunately, does not exist there. So there are no issues to be working in November 2024 and to support this system. It's not an issue. The price for this service is the same as it is shown in my presentation. In fact, it is the price cap for this service, which is appointed by the Commission. So under the conditions of really serious deficit of such services, they are all covered according to this price cap. If I may, a clarifying question to Andriy Harris, because many points which were mentioned by Alexander are also seeing private-public partnership. When we can see the deal about common work and the format of PPP still does not exist in the country. As far as I understand the position of your colleague Halina Yanchenko for her law draft as for PPP, public-private partnership, still it is not formalized enough, right? Look, that is a totally reasonable remark and idea. Obviously, this is the win-win situation when we have heat from the cogeneration unit, which is an accompanying resource, and it can be of not that high price. It is profitable for the city to take this heat, to take it to the grid, to give to the end consumers. Very often, this is about the relationship between some investor and some municipality or the heat utility. How can the state interfere into this relationship? It should be done appropriately, decently. We shouldn't force or not force the municipalities to do something at their communal enterprises. In fact, as of today, using ESCO contracts, we have projects in water canals like Chernomorsk city. UNDP helped to implement this project. When the investor is installing solar panels and the water canal is getting cheaper energy because they really need energy for the pumps, for the water waste, and the same is the situation about the heat. It seems to me that the legislation and the acting regulations allow to implement such projects, but it is hard to implement them if the mayor of the city doesn't want that, or if there is the risk, and we see that the city mayor can be replaced, and then that's what you mentioned about resilience. Whatever was done by the previous city mayor, maybe those were not that integral, we will need to reconsider them. If we need any additional amendments to the legislation, let us discuss that. We are ready to introduce amendments because this idea will definitely be supported by us. It is really clever, and it seems to me it will be useful both for municipalities and businesses and the ones who can invest. Svetoslav Pavluk, Association of Energy Efficient Cities. Thank you for such an opportunity. I would like to go on as a follow-up to the idea of Mr. Kudrytsky, who showed this web of the production or generation of electrical energy and power of different participants at the market, which are numerous. But we have the next level, the level of the consumers of this power, and the ones who do not pay for this energy, so which leads to the debts. And this lack of payments is killing the wish to invest. So I'd like to drive your attention, using the presence of Mr. Tarasyuk, at the problem of water canal. They are water utilities. They are the really well-protected consumers, and they cannot be disconnected. 14 biggest water utilities have lots of indebtedness. They don't increase the tariffs, and for the third year, where I am the head of the supervisory board, since June, they took the loan to pay salaries. So power will be the first thing which the water utility will not pay for. We also mentioned the installation of solar stations at the water utilities to save costs and to decrease the load onto the grid. ESCO contracts, which the investors are having, will be the first ones which again will not be paid for. If we are speaking about the investment climate in energy sector, the tariffs, the regulation of tariffs in the affiliated and neighboring markets like heat and water supply is critically important. Water utilities won't be able to pay for the power, and the heat utilities will not be able to install cogenerational devices. And the budget for the installation is 20 to 80%. It's not 10%. It's almost 80% in some cases from the price of the device itself. So they go to the bank, they ask to take the loan to install it, and the bank says, you are full of debts, you have millions of debts, we cannot give you any loans. And this is the end of this idea. So let the tariffs be free for the water utilities. The water utilities are hundreds, and only 14 of them are regulated by NERC. The ones which are not regulated by NERC are okay. Thank you. Look, you definitely know the real issue with the tariffs of water utilities, and you know what we've done. We've installed the tariffs for the other consumers. I understand that we solved this issue for non-domestic users, and it is not just the solution. But now maybe we came to the solution to let the water utilities go. But just last week I communicated with Kyiv Water Utility. They also don't have this level of readiness. I understand this issue exists and it really needs to be solved. We will move on if there is no other way out. We need to solve it. I understand it. Thank you. There was also the question from the second row, then Igor, and then we'll move to the work at the panel discussions. Mr. Lukshayev, please. Pervomaiske mayor. Hello, I have a question to Andriy. You mentioned in your speech Chernomorsk city. and their water utility. In their scheme, there is also Pervomaiske city. That's my city. I'm the mayor of the city. So I'd like to ask you, when you provide amendments to the legislation about active consumers, do not forget about communal enterprises and institutions working by ESCO contracts and installing solar stations or alternative energy sources. Because as of today, we cannot get this status because we need to own the equipment. But according to ESCO contracts, we own it only after we buy it. So today we have the restricting relay generation, which is only generating within its own consumption. The payback of such stations is longer than. Secondly, the question goes to Mr. Tarasuk. It is the following. Now we have a certain deficit of generation, but somehow we'll have the increase until the level when we'll need to coordinate new capacities, and local energy plans play a significant role. And we cannot get the information from the regional utilities about the volume of consumption. Referring to your regulation 349, they do not provide the information. Speaking about the martial law, because the information cannot be open, could you please solve this situation, at least with Kharkiv gas? It is this situation is like this. Thank you. Honestly speaking, this is the first time when I hear about this issue with regional companies, but I hear it now, and tomorrow I'll try to solve it. And what was the second question? Do we have Alexander Martynuk here? Yes. Could you please tell if, according to ESCO contract, the investor installed the solar panels at the water utility and the electrical energy is sold and there is an excess, can the water utility sell this electrical energy to the grid? Hello, Andrei Mikhailovich. Yes, by law 3220, we have the right of the third party by ESCO contract to install solar panels at the water utilities, and the excess of energy will be sold to the grid if the generation is higher than consumption. For them, this consumer will be just an active consumer and will say, okay, your problem is solved. So, dear colleagues, we need to conclude this discussion here. I do apologize, Igor from the Wind Association. Andrei, sorry, yes, your name is Andrei. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude for such a cool conference. Finally, we heard that we are having this transition to the centralized energy. But still, I'd like to pose several questions. One question, please. Well, that's then to Andrei Harris. We've offered from the association, from our business, the creation of fund to cover the minimal price for the producers of electrical energy and the renewables. And did you study this question? If not, we gave this information to the Presidential Office and the Ministry of Energy so that in the future we wouldn't face the issue of debts. This is the first one. And secondly, now within the association, we are developing the project on the improvement of legislation with cancelling of barriers, which are the obstacles in the development of not only power, but also renewables in particular. This project has been supported by the Netherlands Ministry of Ecology and Climate. So, Mr. Andrei, we would like to meet you at the level of committee and to invite 5 legal companies who are the executors of this project and to report to you, not to have any issues in the future if this law needs amendments. It will really help us. Please, that's it. We are really out of time. And just a short comment, really. I would like to drive your attention to the huge issues at the places with the introduction of renewables. We understand the high level, but as soon as we get to the lower level, we instantly have new issues when the local businesses are blocking the development of new energy technologies. So I'd like you to drive your attention to that as well. Thank you. What was the first question? They want to meet with you. No, that was the second one. We can meet anytime, just tell me when. The question about the special fund, which could help. As for the special fund, yes, I know about this idea. It has been discussed at the meeting with the participation of the Prime Minister and Ms. Katarina from National Bank of Ukraine was in the council. So for the optional buyout of the electrical energy, you could use own money of the enterprises. We had a little bit of cautious response. But if you use the money which is provided by the European Bank or our Western partners, some Western institutions, then this option can be discussed. And I think that this option can have certain future. Okay, thank you. As of the regions, I then invite all of you to discuss that at the coffee break and the second panel, which will be discussed as well. But to conclude this part of discussion, I would still speak with Mr. Robert and Mr. Remy. The question is whether the international community and whether the partners and the banks are ready to work not only with the central level, but with the regional level as well. Will you be ready to work with the regional level to fund the regional projects?
Thank you. I think from the work that we're already doing and what we are doing, we are very open to these types of discussions. Yes.
Okay, thank you. As far as we are concerned, first of all, the Ukraine facility for the part that consists in funding the government, supporting the operation of the state, foresees that 20% of the assistance should be used to meet the needs of regions and local communities. Second part of what I want to say is that our investment component, this 7 billion euros that can be used to guarantee investments up to 45 billion, is essentially managed by international financial institutions, the EBRD, I think Andrei mentioned it, but also the EIB, the European Investment Bank, and others. And these institutions can do whatever they want. I mean by this, they can also work with local projects. So we need to see, I mean, I cannot speak on their behalf, but we need to see what kind of project and decision they would be willing to do when they start using the money that is made available to them. Thank you.
Дякую. Я дякую.
Thank you to all the participants of the discussion. We have taken a bit too much time, but we are now moving forward to the informal discussion during the coffee break. You can talk about that during the coffee break, and then at 6 p.m. we have two panel discussions starting on the right-hand side. There will be a discussion where Mr. Andriy Nemirovsky will lead the talk, and we will be discussing more technical things about the auctions that we discussed today. And on the left-hand side, there will be a discussion about what Andriy started about, how you find partnerships at regional level, so that it is beneficial for everyone, and so that there is a win-win situation. Because if we speak about a win-win situation, there also should be a community interest here. I will remind you again that you need to keep your headphones if you need interpretation. And if there is an air raid, we will absolutely go to the shelter. We will continue our panel discussions there. Now I would like us all to thank the participants of our panel.